And then it's that same year, a year later, this isn't, this, like, my personal preferred genre is kind of like, crime or detection, or, like, fantasy isn't the space that I first am kind of, drawn to. But Skyrim, it was like almost like a kind of GTA-esque fantasy game, wasn't it? Kind of hard fantasy game. And, it was, I just thought it was brilliant. You could play, the choice of characters, the building your character, choosing the path you wanted to go on, all the multiple character routes, where you're going to be a werewolf or a vampire or a warrior, or, it was just incredible. And all the dragon hunting, when you got powerful enough to do that, was just brilliantly well realized. Yeah. And again, like I keep coming back to, it was one of those games that you would, like, you'd wake up, or, come out of the game world, and, the whole night had elapsed as you were trying to hunt the latest dragon. It was just a fantastic game. And then, is that the same year? Yeah, in the same year, Minecraft, yeah, which is the creative game now these days, isn't it? And again, we talk about that a lot in M10 if you're more interested in it. And we're going to do a specific Minecraft talk later in the year. And so I won't talk about it too much right now. But, like, yeah, of course it's on the list. I think it was, like, super high up, wasn't it, on best-selling games list as well earlier on. And then, in some ways, some of the mechanics are, like, I think are addictive, and you kind of not as pure in their play as some of their kind of ancestors, like things like Red Alert and some of those RTS ancestors that have then come onto mobile and been done in, like Clash of Clans. But like Clash of Clans, you cannot deny, the world is appealing, the characterization is brilliant, the monetization strategies are amazing, the gameplay is, there's a reason why it's so successful, yeah, and, like, it's so well thought through, and, it definitely deserves to be on our list. And then one that everyone would go, I expect that to be on the list. One that people might even go, I haven't even heard of it. I haven't even heard of it. I put on a few kind of forgotten classics. This is I Am Alive by Ubisoft, probably the least well-known Ubisoft major game. And I put, you can see on the slide, Ultimate Bleak, 2012. But if you've ever seen the film The Road, or read the book by Cormac McCarthy, The Road, or seen the most depressing episodes of The Walking Dead, or, any, apocalyptic, nihilistic dramas of set within the end of the world, this, I can honestly say, is the best recreation of that within a game experience. This is the bleakest, most nihilistic, toughest game, where you're in this city, within this fog, the enemies come out of the mist at you, like it's desperate, you're fighting other desperate humans, and, like, climbing to these high vantage points, you have hiding equipment, it's an absolute slog. And you feel like you are in the end of the world, like no other game I've ever played, yeah? And so just for, setting its kind of stall out, setting out what it wants to do, and then doing it incredibly well, to the point that it probably suffered in sales somewhat because it was just, super bleak. I think it's an absolute classic. The great kind of undiscovered gem, I think. And there's been other games that have tried to do it, but never quite as well. And then coming to The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead Season 1. Again, an amazing experience by Telltale Games. Very different, choose your own adventure style game with play sections in between. Make massive choices that affect the outcome of the narrative. It didn't have the best graphical engine. It didn't have the best technology in any level. It had the most incredibly moving story that you'd ever seen, yeah? And I won't give it all away. But that bottom image there, that's Kenny, and that's Kenny's son. And Kenny's son has been bitten And so he's going to die and become a zombie. And the choice in the game you face is whether to leave Kenny's son, or so the choice is whether to leave Kenny's son or let Kenny execute his own son, or you'll take the gun and execute Kenny's son. Duck, I think he's called. And you're given a lot of time to decide. And I remember playing the game, and my partner was in the room, and she looked over at me. I was pointing the gun at Kenny, and she said, "Why are you crying? Why are you crying? Why are you crying?" Yeah, I thought, oh my God, I had tears rolling down my face. I said, "I'm crying because I don't know what is going to happen when I pull the trigger. And so with so many games where players spray 1,000 bullets into 1,000 enemies without any consequence, you had one bullet in your gun that was pointing at a small child's face, and it was an incredibly dark and impactful and serious kind of situation, yeah? And I pulled the trigger, and you'll have to play the game or watch the game on YouTube to find out what happens if you pull the trigger. It just had so many, they were big, and they weren't necessarily subtle, but they had so many big emotional beats, yeah. And really it kind of, I always felt it was like a predecessor to another big game later in the list. Far Cry, another Ubisoft one, great franchise, maybe dipped a little bit, maybe a little bit of formula fatigue in the recent ones, but like you can't argue with them. Some of them are absolutely brilliant, yeah. Probably the best and most well-liked one, Far Cry 3, where the actual mechanics of building out your empire and controlling your land and taking over suits, being in a number of little tropical islands. And there's Vaz, one of the best Far Cry enemies they ever had. I worked on a Far Cry VR game, Far Cry Into Reality, was it? I can't remember the title. Sorry, it's been a long talk. But I worked on a Far Cry version of I worked on a VR version of Far Cry 3, taking elements of Far Cry 3 and transposing them into VR. Got it right in the end there. And in actual fact, I'm going to break a rule again. After Far Cry 3, they've done a number of kind of smaller games that are kind of Far Cry spin-offs, and they did one called Far Cry Primal, which was the Far Cry mechanics set within primitive kind of Neanderthal culture, and I thought it was the best game where you can, the best caveman game or cave person game ever created, and actually probably my favourite Far Cry game, just because of the world setting. And you get to ride a mammoth and smash it through your enemy's primitive village. Yeah, and said, what could be better? What could be better than that? And so I give that 77. Yeah, I cheat. 76, 77. And then little bit Tetris-y kind of inspired. By King, Candy Crush Saga, 78. You can't argue with it, can you? I mean, you might not like in some ways what it's doing to the people that play it. The people who play it might be very different from some of the audiences that we're trying to reach with some of the things we're doing. But it's an incredible experience. When I used to work in London, I used to play Candy Crush on the train going home for months on end. It's a really, really, really well-honed, very addictive, very well realised. It's where kind of gaming starts to meet kind of gambling mechanics and addiction mechanics, isn't it? Yeah, but it's very, very, very well done. Even looking at this one screen makes me start to feel a little bit of an itch to play the game and re-download it onto my phone. And then a really good game for us to look at, 79, 2014 by Creative Assembly, Alien Isolation, an epic surprise of a game, I think. And the great thing about it is this game has a few rough edges, and this game in moments looks like it's created by a mid-sized team, and it looks like something that your team maybe could have a go at trying to make. Yeah, it doesn't look super unattainable. Whereas, when Mario 64 arrived in our office, it looked and felt unattainably much better than anything we could ever do. Yeah, we tried to up our game, but this isn't like that. But despite that, this I think is probably one of the scariest games ever made, and probably you've got Aliens. It's probably the next best Alien experience. Yeah, it's a mind-blowingly tense and terrifying recreation of the Alien movie, and if you haven't played it, I bet you can pick it up, really on budget, and it's just it's a masterclass in orchestrated terror. Yeah, when you're being hunted by the alien, and your flamethrower there has got 10% fuel, which would rebuff him for maybe one more attempt, and then you've got to find some tunnel to hide in as he stalks you around, and you can see him on your radar. It's just terrifying and brilliantly well realized, and there's a whole great secret in it that I'm not going to reveal. 80, I put Rocket League, because for years and years and years, everyone always said that future sport or sports combat was always a dead duck. There was Wipeout that was relatively successful, and everyone else always failed and sold about 5 units. Yeah, and so how you get this off the ground, I do not know. Yeah, but it's brilliant, and it's going strong now, isn't it? 10 years later. Yeah, the kind of football rally car racing, team against team. It's combat driving sports. I'm like doing the play, create, share, aren't I? Yeah, it's just an epic experience. Yeah, and it deserves to be within the 100, and it will be there when you do the top 100 in 10 years. It will still be in there.